Hey YouTube, welcome back to the Guitar Slinger Hockey channel. I got a quick review or educational video on flare steel. So, I don't know how much you guys know about the different type of steel options that you have for your skates. I just have these on my Bauer 2X Pro Vapors, and I just kind of wanted to talk to you a little about my experience with steel over the last couple of years. So, first of all, let me say that there is a difference in steel, and not all steel is created equally. I think that one of the things that I would consider to be the gold standard in runners would be step steel, specifically black steel. I think this has been some of the best stuff that you can get for years. At the time of recording this in 2020, I guess my understanding is that step steel is only going to be available to CCM skates now, moving forward. And so I thought, and if you weren't aware of that, it sounds like somebody screwed something up, and the company Step Steel is now only going to be providing steel for CCM skates. So if you are interested in buying step steel right now for your Bauer 2Edge holder, you should probably do it now. Anyways, getting back to the flare steel that I have on these skates. So if you are not familiar with flare, let's see if I can get this in focus a little bit, but really what's going on with flare is that the steel is quite a bit thicker than traditional steel. In fact, it is a normal steel, if you're not aware, is 3 millimeters in thickness. This is 6 millimeters in thickness, and in addition to that, there is a tiny little ridge right here. You can probably see the mirror of it that quote-unquote flares out at the bottom. So the part of the steel that clips into your runner, or your holder, excuse me, is 3 millimeters thick like any other steel would be, but at the bottom it becomes 6 millimeters thicker. I guess to me it almost seems like a figure skate or a goalie skate thickness, but maybe it isn't that thick. For reference point, you can kind of see how, I'll try to do this with one hand here, bear with me. Oh my gosh. I don't know if you guys can see that. I have on the right side is the step. Yeah, that's a better view of it. On the right side is the step, and on the left side is the flare. So that's one thing that you can see the difference on. Other thing that you should be able to see a difference on is how tall the step is compared to the flare. The step is quite a bit taller. It is, I don't know what the exact measurements are, but it's quite a bit taller. And so what the flare steel does, in my opinion, so you first of all, what you'll notice if you ever go to this stuff is that some hockey shops that sharpen skates will be nervous to sharpen the skate for you because they don't know what that steel is. So that is something you're going to have to deal with. However, what I've noticed is that with flare, because of the thickness of the blade, you can actually skate faster, and your skate is not as impacted by rough, chewed up ice as a standard thickness steel would be. And you also get more stability out of the steel and your skate, essentially. Basically it enables you to sharpen the skate duller than you normally would, because the skate has more surface area to be holding on to the ice. So what I noticed by skating on it the first time is it cuts just as well, if not better, than a pair of step steel runners would do. In other words, like, I feel like I can turn just as tight with the flare, but it feels more stable just because there's more steel grip in the ice. But I also don't feel glued to the ice as I do with the step steel. Or excuse me, I don't feel glued like there's too much bite or something like that. I think that if I have to look at it objectively, I do think that the step steel has better glide than the flare does, just because of the coating. It's got the stain. This whole step steel has the diamond light coating, the DLC coating, which that can't be beat in glide at this point. That said, I do think Flare has recently come out with its own DLC coating, which should be interesting to try if we ever can skate again. But so I think that you might get a little bit better benefit out of the step with regard to gliding on freshly cut ice. But when it comes to choppy ice, like third period ice, I think the Flare excels better than the step does in that one. The other thing is about the height of the steel. So, you'll hear the argument coming from Bauer, from Step, from anybody who makes a steel that's really tall, that is a superior advantage over other steel. And you know what? I think that to some degree it is, because you can turn sharper in theory. But what I've noticed, and I think this is becoming noticeable just in the hockey community in generally, with people who actually try out different steel, that I think that step steel might be too tall. And I noticed that on a previous pair of True skates that I had that came with step steel. I think they're actually tall enough now that they create a stability issue. And going back and forth and trying the step steel next to the flare is just, like, I think the perfect height. And now these have been sharpened down quite a bit, and they're actually a little taller than this when they're brand new, but there's nowhere near as tall as that when you first get them. The step steel actually, in my opinion, adds a little bit of instability as you're getting up taller, especially if you have skates that don't fit perfectly. And what I mean by that is, I've had some, although I think that these Vapor skates have fit me the best in a while, these are actually a pretty low skate, and they're also they're very low volume, and they're not very tall this way comparatively. And for somebody like me who's 230 pounds, I've actually noticed that probably I should have gone with maybe a Supreme skate to get that additional stability and height out of the boot, because going from step steel to flare has shown me that the step steel height actually creates a little bit less stability, and there is a slight speed wobble factor while wearing the step steel. And I'm like, I was kind of surprised by that, but that is a thing that I noticed. So just something to kind of think about. But I guess what I have to say is, now that I've tried all of the main manufacturers like Flare, Step, Bionic, all of the LS4 models, including the LS5 steel that came with these skates, the massive blade I've tried, none of them can really hold their own against the Flare and the Step. They're actually, I would go so far as to say that the Bionic and the LS5 steel were probably my least favorite, but these two would be the ones you'd want to look at. And so I guess at this point, what I would consider doing is picking up the Flare with the diamond light coating, the black. It's basically black mirror finish like this, but those weren't available at the time where I bought these. So I bet you a combination of that DLC Flare would be probably the perfect setup for a skate blade. If you do have concerns with people being unwilling to sharpen something quote-unquote weird and different, that probably means a couple of things. It probably means one thing, that you probably live in an area where people aren't that familiar with hockey. So that's one thing. The other thing is that you probably have a situation where, you know, people just aren't really comfortable skate sharpening in general. But this will work on any type of machine possible. One of the things that I've noticed is that I don't own a Sparks machine, but the local shop that I use has a Sparks machine, and it works perfectly on that. So the other thing to consider too is that you need to get a different type of sharpening. So for instance, if you use, say, a 1/2 inch on normal steel, you're going to have to look at what the equivalent sharpening is with flare. So I think it's like 1 1/4 inch would be the equivalent of a 1/2 inch. I don't know, I'm probably giving you the wrong numbers, but it's different, so you'd have to look it up to make sure you're getting the same feel out of your skates. You could even go a little bit less sharp in the flare, which is cool. Get a little more speed out of them. And you would just profile them like you normally would. So in my particular case, I have a superior profile on these. And, you know, I think then basically that's just 3 different profiles on here. I think that they work perfectly on anything you want to do. So hopefully this has added a little bit of clarity on, you know, this steel. And hopefully maybe you give them a try and see if you like them. With that said, let me know if you guys have any questions, and I will do my best to answer them. Peace.